You're listening to Live Stories on Talk Radio Wales. The people at the heart of your community telling it as it is.
I'm with James Evans, MS member of the Welsh Parliament for Brecon and Radnorshire, Welsh Conservatives. Good morning, James. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Alan. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Nice to see a bit of cooling off in the weather, isn't it?
I know, we need a bit of rain. You know, all the wildfires that's been going on, it's been horrendous. So we need a bit of rain to dampen everything down a bit.
Yeah, the wildfires you're talking about, not in the Senedd, I hope. They're the grassland version.
There's always wildfires in the Senedd. We're forever firefighting down there.
That's right. Let's just start off then. It's just a quick question, really. How did you get into politics? Why did you get into politics?
Well, I'll be honest, I sort of fell into it, really, Alan. I was involved in my local community, been in Young Farmers from the age of 10, always been quite politically active, always very interested in the news, current affairs. And the local council, Powys County Council, were planning to close Gwynedd High School. I got involved in the campaign there. I've always been quite outspoken. Someone said, why don't you stand for local council? And I and then I decided to stand, and lo and behold, I was then put on the cabinet in Powys after I was elected, and then I went from there. And I always believed if you could do a good job for your constituents, maybe you could go on a little bit further. And I stood for selection then for the Senedd for Brecon and Radnorshire, got selected and subsequently got elected, and here I am talking to you today.
And was your choice of Welsh Conservative a historic one, a family one? Was it your political views, or was it just that Brecon and Radnorshire was a pretty safe seat for the Conservatives?
Well, no, my family are a political coat of many colours. Part of my mother's family have been staunch Liberal Democrats. My father's family, originally from over Ebbw direction, my grandfather was the convener for the union and a lifelong trade unionist and Labour Party member. I was with my auntie not so long ago on my dad's side, and she said your grandfather would turn in his grave if you knew you were a Conservative, but he was a lifelong Labour man, Labour supporter. And then on the other side, my grandparents, my mum's side then, were very staunch Conservatives. I could have gone and married a different ways. I felt the Conservative way was right for me around personal responsibility, government giving people the opportunity to get on. But I think people sort of shoehorn me into being this die-hard right-winger. But I've always said I've actually got quite liberal views on a lot of things. And I said I'm economically conservative and quite socially liberal. And I think the majority of people who live in my constituency would class themselves probably as the small C Conservatives, and that's probably where I see myself at a lot of the time. I just have different opinions and views to some of the Labour members and Plaid Cymru members in the Senedd, and they like to shoehorn you then as a die-hard right-winger, which is the case.
Do you think then the Conservatives haven't done very well in Wales in the Welsh elections historically? Do you think it's as a result of being seen to be so closely associated with the Westminster Conservatives?
I don't think so. I think there's a lot of communities out there which don't trust the Conservatives for things that have gone on in the past. I think it's historical. Perhaps things that the Conservative Party has done in the past haven't been favourable to Wales, and that's why I think the new intake of MSs now, and I talk to the people who are with me, Natasha Ashgar, Sam Kurtz, Sam Rowlands and others, a younger generation of Welsh Conservatives coming forward are very much keen that we do have a distinctively Welsh message like we do with the Scottish Conservatives, that they are putting forward issues that are relevant to Wales and how we can actually improve the lives of the people of our country. Because sometimes I think that the Labour Party and Plaid do a great job of trying to say, you're just an offshoot of the English party. That's not true. We're a unionist party. We believe in being part of the United Kingdom and a strong part of that and a part of the Conservative Party. But it is right that we have a devolved parliament here and we do things which are right for the people of Wales. And if sometimes there has to be policy divergence, I think that's right. We've called for the St. David's Day bank holiday. It's something I've asked both the leaders in the leadership contest for the Conservative Party to commit to. It's a cross-party issue that we all want in the Senedd. I think it should be given on that basis. There's things like the HS2 Barnett consequentials. We've been calling for that, against UK government policy, not to give Wales consequentials. We believe that's right for Wales, and that's what we're going to stand up for. We're not just going to do as we're told. If we think something's right for the people here, we'll say that.
You mentioned the history. Do you think the ghosts of Thatcher and Heath and the perception of that era is a stigma that you can't shake off, and one that might still be contributing to the fact of not securing those seats in Westminster and in the Senedd?
Yeah. People go on about the mines, and I campaigns in part of my constituency, I get Margaret Thatcher closing the mines. I always try reminding people more mines closed under a Labour government than under a Conservative government. There are things that go historically all the way back to when Winston Churchill was Prime Minister that have been quoted at me for different reasons. We look at some of the things Margaret Thatcher did, giving the people in Wales the opportunity to own their own homes through, buying their council properties. There's good things the Conservatives have done for Wales, but I think that Labour and Plaid are very good at trying to drag up the ghosts of the past to try and remind people you can't trust the Conservatives. That isn't right. We're a very different party to what we were then. We're a broad church of a number of different people and views. And as I said, going into any election, the Welsh Conservatives put forward a Welsh policy platform that we think will improve the lives of the people of Wales. We've had the same government here in one form or another for over 22 years now. And, I don't think that's right. I think the people of Wales deserve a change. That's my personal view. And they need to be seen how things can be done differently.
Well, on that point, has Labour now in Wales established itself so well and become so powerful that we may never see any other form of government, coalition or otherwise in Wales, other than with Labour as the dominant party? We see, obviously, in Llanelli, you could put a donkey with a red rosette on and people will vote for it. It's that bad. There's no opposition, really.
Yeah, I can't hide away from that. Labour had one of their best election results in the Senedd ever at the last election. But what we're seeing is more probably further left-wing policies being pushed in Wales. Now, Mark Drakeford himself has said he wants to see Wales become a socialist state with, and that's just, I don't think that's what the people of Wales want. I don't think they want a government that's very controlling. I don't think they want a government that taxes a hospitality industry. I don't think they want a government that taxes them on gardens to drive on the roads, that doesn't do anything on infrastructure. I don't think the people of Wales want that. They want a government which is helping them through the cost of living crisis, which is helping them get from A to B, which is actually doing things that promote our tourism industry, help our businesses, get our schools going again, back to the standards they should be, and having a decent NHS here. We don't need to see these long waiting list times. We need to see the government address it. We only had Lynette Morgan recently on the press blaming the UK government for not giving nurses a pay rise, considering the Welsh NHS gets more than they do in England. So I'm afraid to say the Welsh government like to blame the UK government for everything. I'm afraid they just need to take a good hard look in the mirror sometimes. And I think that the Welsh public, are starting to see that, especially with the 100 million that they want to propose for more Senedd members. The more people hear about that, the more they start to think that Mark Drakeford, especially, is starting to lose touch. Through COVID, I've never criticised most people on their leadership through COVID. It was a 1 in a million thing. It's a wartime footing. People got things wrong. People got done things right. But personally, my own view is that since then, Mark Drakeford has been on some sort of a power trip, and he needs to actually realise that not everybody in Wales believes in these hard left socialist principles that he does.
The problem is, I guess, James, is that I don't know what your views are of Plaid Cymru now they're in partnership, but from where we're standing, it seems to have weakened any opposition and on what you're saying there, albeit your opinion, your views and your party's views and so on. It is a very real opposition. What are your views of Plaid? Have they sold out?
I think they've sold out. I think they sold out to the people who voted for them. Adam Price was on record saying that the worst thing you could ever think of was another 5 years of Mark Drakeford and the Welsh Labour government. And what he has done is given Mark Drakeford 5 years, and he's actually got nothing from it. And I feel quite sorry for some of the Plaid members in the Senedd. They had a policy platform which is being delivered through government, but anything good that comes out of it, the Welsh Labour government pounced on. The free school meals for children. Labour said that was one of their flagship policies. It wasn't even in their manifesto. They pinched that from Plaid as part of the cooperation agreement. And then Plaid have lost that. And I think Plaid Cymru were in a very strong position outside of government. We held them their feet to the fire on MBZs and managed to get that reviewed by a committee. There's a number of key votes which we probably could have worked with them on to hold Welsh government to account on things. But now it just seems that they've lost a very powerful political position that they were in, that they could have been the balance of power in the Senedd and held Welsh Government to account on a number of things. And you look at First Minister's questions, even when we go back and what it was like before we had recess, it was more Adam Price having a bit of a breeze through with the First Minister. It was like, First Minister, don't you think we're doing an amazing job together? Oh, yes, I do, Adam. Thank you very much for your question. And that has come to the form of scrutiny. And I know it's frustrating some Plaid Cymru members that they can't go at the government as much as they'd like to because they seem tied to them now in one form or another. And I think it's a great shame. And it just shows to people out there that no matter what Plaid say, they will always back up Labour when it comes to it. Yeah. And I don't think that's what the people in places like West Wales voted for particularly. They didn't. I would say to the Welsh Labour members, you only represent theoretically a small proportion of the landmass of Wales. There's a lot of other parts of Wales which you don't represent and have got no representation in at all. So you must remember that you only represent everything below the M4, not above it.
We've said before the scandal isn't exclusive to Westminster, but obviously Boris Johnson and the Partygate and all these kind of things have really, hit the headlines. Does that impact on your efforts to convince the electorate that you can be trusted as a politician, especially under the sort of blue flag?
Yeah, I'm not going to hide away from that. Things that have gone on in Westminster haven't tarnished politicians down there. They've tarnished everybody, and that's not just Conservative politicians. That's Labour, Lib Dem, Plaid, no matter where you're from. We're all seen as not trusted people who are all crooked. That's not the case, and I find that on social media. You get the fake profiles, and they all attack you on a weekly basis for what you're supposed to have done or not done, and that you're crooked and you're just the same as everybody else. And it's very hard to sometimes to get past that. And I think people need to remember that we are individuals as well. We are people with feelings. And when you are being attacked religiously on social media about who you are, what party you stand for, just remember there's a person on the other side of that who is looking at this, who's got a family, who do take quite offence to some of the things that are said about me and my colleagues, but it does damage politicians. But I think there's a big job that we need to do in convincing the public that a lot of us are in this for the right reasons. There are some people who are in politics for the wrong reasons, and there are. I'm not going to hide away from that. But there are genuine people in politics who go into it for the right reasons, to change people's lives for the better and not the worse. And don't power us all with the same brush, because we're not all like that.
We've talked about scandal. We've seen the First Minister call for an inquiry into the ministers attending a dinner party with the allegations that some form of lobbying took place. What can be done to ensure openness, transparency, accountability when it comes to the dealings between ministers and lobbyists or business owners?
Yeah, well, I was very clear. I've spoken on this before, that I think we do need a lobbyist register for Wales. The way it is done needs to be discussed and done properly. But, when you get told that a meeting between two ministers and a client, the lobbyist, is a social event, I don't class that as social. If I've got friends who are lobbyists, if I met them for a pint on the pub without a client, that could be classed as a social event. If I meet them down the pub or in a dinner party with 2 or 3 of their clients, that's a work event. And I think that should be recorded properly, because there are even conversations that happen at social events that play on people's minds and can influence decision making. And that's where I do think we do need to see that lobbyist register for Wales, that meetings, not just between government ministers, but politicians like myself, politicians in Plaid, the Liberal Democrats, are all recorded properly, that people know who we're meeting, what the purpose of that meeting is, so everything is above board and transparent, and that people can have confidence that the decisions that we take are done because we think they're in the best interest of the people, and not big companies and corporations who think they can just get a bit of access through a lobbyist to try and get a piece of legislation changed.
Plaid Cymru stayed very quiet on that issue, given that, a lot of the people have gone on to big executive jobs, and Darren is traditionally linked with Plaid Cymru as well. Do you think Adam Price should have spoken out sort of more robustly on this?
I can't really comment on what Adam does or doesn't do. I know which event we're talking about and what lobbyists is. I know some members in Plaid have been very outspoken. Mabon Gwynfor, for example, has been very outspoken in saying that we do need to see registers of meetings between lobbyists and ministers, whether that's formal or informal. I do think Adam has got a leadership role here. He is the leader of the 3rd largest party in the country. And just because he's in some cooperation meeting agreement with the First Minister, it doesn't mean that he should keep quiet on issues like this, because it does undermine people's view of Plaid Cymru, and actually they are not just part of that cosy Cardiff Bay establishment, that they are there actually trying to do their bit to hold Welsh Government to account and make sure that the decisions are taken properly and not done in any backroom deals in people's houses over a couple of glasses of wine and a dinner.
We're looking at a cost of living crisis, and there are also some who are calling for independence for Wales at the same time. Do you see independence as part or even whole solution for many of the problems Wales is encountering economically?
No. Very short answer. No, I don't. I always say, I say this to my friends in Plaid Cymru, I'm to be convinced on anything. I can be convinced on anything. And the arguments I hear for independence just don't stack up. They don't stack up. I don't know how we would fund our vital public services. Wales gets more money from the Exchequer than England does. So, excuse me. I don't see the argument for it. I do think we are stronger together. It showed that during the COVID crisis, that when we do act as a united kingdom, we can get things done. There are things on infrastructure. I was very disappointed during COVID that the First Minister seemed to put this invisible barrier between England and Wales and created these internal divisions within the UK. That's not good. We are one country. And I always say that Welsh people, they may not understand what the union is, but they understand what the United Kingdom is, and they understand what a great force of good it is across the globe, and our strong partnerships with NATO and the G7 and others, of how we can lead the way in doing things on climate change, on world security, on reducing plastic, antimicrobial resistance. That is what the UK does when it acts together, and trying to pull it apart, in my view, is a complete total waste. And I do not get the sentiments that said from people in Yes Cymru that England disrespects Wales all the time. I don't see it. The people on the street don't see it. I just think it seems to be a few narrow-minded individuals on Twitter who like to spout this stuff all the time.
You mentioned Mark Drakeford there and the distinction he made between, Wales and England during the COVID pandemic. I think that was more in line with sort of, look, we have devolved issues here, so don't lump us into NHS Wales and education and so on. But in general, do you think he's stolen away the nationalist ground and steered Wales to believing it is stronger within the Union? Do you think he'll ever try to steer Wales back into Europe somehow, despite the Brexit vote by the people of Wales?
Well, it's quite, Sir Keir Starmer, his leader in Westminster, said there is no way that Labour would join the EU. I think we have seen a change of language now, actually, from Welsh Labour. Before Keir Starmer said that, it was very much aggressive against members in the Senedd and the Conservatives in the Senedd who voted to leave the European Union, that we were making Wales poorer, doing this, that and the rest. But the language has changed now from Welsh Labour, unless you're Alan Davies, and he will be a Europhile to the end. But, I think Labour will not take us back into the EU. I don't think that's the case, but you can never be quite sure what they're going to do. They change their mind on another thing, and it's Captain Hindsight and Keir Starmer. I don't see Mark Drakeford doing that. But I do think having Adam Price in the cooperation agreement has really weakened the nationalist argument, because I think it's neutered Plaid Cymru in a way within the Senedd, that they can't make some of the bold statements, because if they do, it's going to affect the cooperation agreement and what Mark wants to do. He set out his vision for how he wants to reform the United Kingdom under a federalist sort of set up within the union. I don't see that, because I just see it as a way that will keep the left wing establishment locked into power forever and not give anybody a different alternative, and that's something that unfortunately the left like to do. On
the flip side, then, there is obviously a growing nationalist campaign. Do you think we're going to see a split? Do you think Adam days are numbered, and we may see another national party, pro-Europe, pro-independence, that will take some ground? Should there be next elections? Council elections?
Well, I don't want to see that personally. As a unionist, I don't want to see another party. But I will say about Adam Price, I just don't know what he's doing with Plaid at the minute. To me, in the Senedd, he doesn't look like he has the enthusiasm that he used to have. I just think he's chose the easy option, during this term of the Senedd. And I said there may potentially be another party come along. It happened with the Conservative Party over Europe. The forms of UKIP and the rest, because they didn't think we were strong enough on Europe. It can happen. You get members in your party who are disillusioned with the way you're taking a said party, and it might happen. You never know. Yes, Cymru may evolve into a new political party. I don't know. I'm not involved in any of those discussions. I don't know what happens on that side of the aisle, but it could potentially happen. If it does, I think it really does undermine the position of Plaid Cymru.
Climate change is one of the biggest issues on the political agenda, and yet the daily lives of the people of Wales and the issues they face are far more complex and detached from that. Many other so-called woke agendas so prominently pushed and invested in by Welsh Government. Do you think that small nations like Wales should be putting all of their eggs into the climate change basket, or do you think that we are far outstripping the dirty neighbours near and far on what we're doing, and should take a much broader brush to using the budget and preparing for the worst, an economic crisis, a food crisis, a health, education, and employment crisis? Do we need to think and do things differently?
No, I'll be clear for now. Climate change is an issue. It is an issue. It's a genuine issue, and it needs to be addressed. But we cannot forget the day-to-day issues of what the people of Wales want. When I talk to my constituents on a daily basis, they want a good NHS. They want to go into the doctors to get an appointment. They want to ring the dentist to get an appointment. If they want a scan, they want it quickly because they want to know what's wrong with them. They don't want to be waiting 12 months for a dentist appointment, 6-7 weeks for a doctor's appointment, 12 weeks for a scan. People on cancer diagnosis having to wait. There's serious non-problems. They don't want that. Education. People in Wales want to see our children having a good education. Our education standards are going backwards. The health service is going backwards. They want an opportunity to get jobs and employment. That's what people want. They want better wages. They want the government to invest in things like that. Do they do that? I don't think so. They spend more of their time, and I always say, talking of the woke, the non-issues in the Senedd. I sit there some days, and I know I've got colleagues across the chamber who sit there sometimes who are completely disillusioned with the government and the business that we discuss. They are non-issues, or they're issues that the Welsh government says an issue, but they've had power over the last 20 years and never addressed. And that I want to see statements on the health service, the education of our children, how we're going to improve the economy. We don't hear these things. How we're going to make Wales a better place to attract tourism, with all these new rules coming in around tourism taxes, the hospitality tax on the 182 days. It's a government that seems to be attacking the people all the time and taxing them all the time. And I don't think they're doing enough of a job focusing on the issues. Yes, it's right. We need to look at the climate change issues and how we can roll out EV charging points, how we can get to more greener, sustainable energies across the country. But it doesn't have to be the main focus of government. And Lee Waters' idea that, stopping the building of the M4 at Leith Road, for example, if that was more free-flowing, traffic could move easily. Instead, you get traffic queued all the way back at the M4, standing idle, pumping toxic carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Is that good for air quality and pollution? I don't know. And then you see the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits being rolled out across the country, the cost of how many hundreds of millions to the taxpayer. Again, in these trial areas, they've seen more accidents there than before. People getting, more irate behind the wheel. People just stood idle in queues, pumping, fumes out the car. I just don't think Welsh government do not get the basics right. And any good government should get the basics right. And if they can get those right, then they can look at the sideline issues. That's my personal view, and they just don't get the basics right.
Looking at the media in Wales, it's pretty much a sort of a one-horse race almost. It's being closed down. We're losing, local news coverage. I'm talking to you today from, a sort of a two-man hyperlocal outfit that has been established for 5 years, had no help, no funding, a little bit from Welsh Government, but not much. We struggle, but we give people a platform, we give people a voice. Do you get a fair deal with media in Wales? And is it the media too comfortable and close with Welsh Parliament? Do we need more plurality and investment in, for example, the hyperlocal sector?
Yeah, I got my local papers in my constituency. I got the Mid Wales Journal, the Brecon and Radnor Express and the County Times, and I think they do a really good job of highlighting local news, local stories, but I find sometimes they pick up more national, like you probably do in your local paper that you work for, pick up the national issues. Or sometimes I think the bigger outlets don't pick up the bigger issues. They give a one-side version of events, and I was quite pleased actually to see Martin Shipton run in with the issue about the purchase of Charleston Farm. I think that's a very important issue the Welsh public need to know about. And I find especially around Senedd expansion, for example, you see a very biased view by the media on Senedd expansion. You speak to Wales Online, BBC, ITV, they tend to give this one-sided view that having more Senedd members is going to fix everything. I don't think they give the alternative view of what the other political parties are saying. I look at the Welsh news on both channels sometimes, and there are some issues that are talked about on there that you think, what? Really? And this went on in the Senedd today. A prime example of one that got me is when I asked a question to the First Minister about hospitality, and he turned around and said, I'm not an agony aunt for the hospitality industry. If Boris Johnson had said that in Westminster, he'd have been asked to resign because of a complete contempt, or apologise for having contempt to the hospitality industry. Mark Drakeford says it, people laugh. It's like, oh, good, funny thing, what Mark said that, how hilarious. Doesn't get reported anyway. Doesn't get picked up on that. If I'd have said something like that in the chamber, I'm sure every news outlet in Wales would have run on how nasty, horrible Tory has said this about our hospitality industry. There's things that get raked up, but Andrew R.T. Davis, and all the good things he says get missed, and then one bad thing he says gets raked up everywhere. Every 12 months, the same story seems to emerge. And you're like, well, what is this about? It's just biased media. And I do think people are too close, that some of the media outlets are far too close to the Welsh government. And it does then, when the Welsh public look at things, don't quite understand the decisions that are being taken in Wales. The thing on the hospital, the only reason I think Gilson Farm got such a big issue is because we made such a huge thing of it, and there was a big public outcry locally that the media outlets couldn't ignore this. And when you start getting under everything else of it, it's sort of, I don't know, Jack of the North or whoever, I don't know if you've ever met him, but starts doing the digging and the looking. It's surprising how many people in media are involved and everything else that comes with it. And it's not great, but we try, and I just hope that one day we can get to a more balanced view, because I tend to get more coverage from national outlets, your Mails, your Telegraphs, your Spectators. I tend to write articles for them when they ask, and I can get more coverage there than in the Welsh media. And how is that right? A Welsh politician in the Senedd gets more airtime from a national newspaper that covers the whole of the UK than actually newspapers which are covered in Wales. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, James Evans, MS, many thanks for sparing your time today, valuable time, and speaking to us. It's been a fascinating insight into certainly a Conservative point of view in Wales, and let's hope we can catch up again soon. Yeah, definitely. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm happy to come back anytime.
You're listening to Life Stories on Talk Radio Wales. The people at the heart of your community telling it as it is.